And joining me now is Elissa Myers. She's Executive Director of the Academy for Eating Disorders. Thanks for joining us. You know, is China really just experiencing what other countries, other regions have gone through with fast food everywhere nowadays and a more sedentary lifestyle?
Well, that's exactly correct. A study that was done a few years ago actually showed that there are some countries with a higher incidence by percent of population than China. For example, Brazil is surprisingly one of the countries with the highest percentage. But of course, China has so many people in it. And by the way, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
However, a study recently came out from the European Journal on Preventive Cardiology, and what they reported in a 29-year research study done in China was that in 1985, when the study began, less than 1% of all young men were obese, clinically obese by BMI standards. And in 2014, 29 years later, that number was over 16%. And among young girls, it had gone from less than 0.1% to over 10%.
Why boys versus girls? Why more boys than girls?
Well, I'm not sure. I have heard people speculate that at that point it's theory that the boy is still the center of the family, that he gets the best of the, but I'm really not sure why that is. It may be that girls are a little more aware of their body image and competing to maintain a smaller physique with their girlfriends.
We've seen in other countries taxes added to sodas banned from elementary schools to sort of get a handle on this obesity situation. So do you think this requires government intervention, or is this more of a personal issue? What more could be done, especially in a big country like China?
Well, clearly, some of the public policy interventions have worked very well. The Partnership for Prevention, a U.S. think tank, did a study that put a tax on soft drinks, where experiments have been done taking soda or unhealthy foods out of the school cafeterias. And it seems to have some impact. But honestly, it's much more complicated than that. We're learning so much about the brain and its relationship to the stomach. And we know that probably if I were going to say there's a single factor, it is the development of an unhealthy relationship to food, which could be triggered by schools, for example, lining children up in front of their peers and weighing them and reporting their BMI, and body shaming and fat shaming goes on. And far from having the intended consequence of having the children think, oh, I better go on a diet, they develop this anxiety that they use food to respond to. So it has almost the opposite effect of what was intended.
We saw in the story, a Hong Kong story, about this young boy who lived in a rural area. His parents lived far away, lived with his grandparents. What would you say about emotional eating and eating to fill that void? Is that part of it as well?
Well, there is emotional eating, and there also fascinating research has been done, and they've discovered that there is a significant and absolute genetic link to our relationship with food and eating disorders. I've heard the number, different researchers have come up with slightly different numbers, but a study done by Cynthia Bullock at the University of North Carolina has shown that 65% of all eating disorders have a common genetic link. And there are triggers, so social triggers, cultural triggers that can lead both to not eating enough, anorexia, or binge eating disorder and bulimia. You can't look at somebody and see that they have an eating disorder, but clearly in at least 8 to 10% of the population, there is this mental illness. It's a genuine, bona fide, diagnosable, recognized by the psychiatric associations, mental illness. in our relationship to food.
And very quickly, when it comes to boys and girls, once again, is it more acceptable for a young boy to be slightly overweight or chubby versus a young girl?
I think that rather than answer that question, I think the really important point is that we have to teach families and children that you can be healthy at all sizes, and that what is really important is to develop the self-esteem in children, make sure that they have access to good medical care and coverage, and that if there is a problem, it's diagnosed early and treated well.
All right, Elissa Myers, we appreciate your insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.